Bob Eckardt with the Cleveland Foundation. I'll begin by sending Ron Richards regrets. He had intended to be here, but with a health issue in his family, he couldn't make it this evening. I thought maybe how I could be helpful is talk a little bit about why the Cleveland Foundation has taken on this issue and the role of philanthropy in it. I think the environment and energy is not something that a lot of foundations work in. But the Cleveland Foundation has really been committed to the concept that one role for where there's really three roles for a foundation that kind of fit into this. The first is supporting innovation. The second is lowering the risk potential, kind of helping things to market that maybe aren't quite ready yet and need some kind of support. And the third is the leadership role that we have as philanthropy with the ability to take long-term views, to not have to think about quarter-to-quarter returns, et cetera. So we've really played our role out in four critical activities that I'll talk a little bit about that fit within those three roles. The first really is investing in innovation. Investing in academic support. Case Western Reserve has received significant support for the Great Lakes Energy Institute with the idea that this region can develop a national leadership role in all kinds of things in energy. You'll hear more about, I think, work they're doing in fuel cells and energy storage and smart grid. How can we, as a region, make this one of our strengths? The second really is supporting the development of technology that we believe is important to the future of this region. We think one of the challenges in this region is that we missed a lot of the IT revolution. We were always playing catch up. Is there a way we can get in front of something new and big? And many of the panels have talked about energy efficiency, energy production being something new and big. So how can we as a region get there? And I think that really underlies our support for wind, starting in a very simple way with the turbine outside this institution, and then work that led to the creation of LEEDCo, with the understanding that we as a region have some real strengths we can bring to this, a strong workforce, kind of a center in advanced manufacturing, academics, technical expertise, and wind to spare. The third area really is investment. The Cleveland Foundation put major dollars into Jumpstart to invest in new energy companies when it was really hard to raise investment dollars. We did this not as a grant, but as an investment using our assets to invest in kind of new and emerging companies in the energy space, and I'm pleased to say that we've gotten that entire investment back. We got a check for $1.4 million from Jumpstart, representing the fact that the companies they had invested in had grown to the point where they could repay our investment. And finally, I think it's the leadership role. Some of you know that the Cleveland Foundation has used fellows in the past. We used Richard Stubbe in advanced energy, not to make grants, but to provide kind of intellectual fodder. And I'm pleased to say that we've recently hired David Orr, some of you know him from Oberlin, who will be a fellow with us for at least a year. And he's currently looking at how this region can take the lessons from the Oberlin project and how it can build connections between foundations and academic institutions that reach beyond Cleveland to really build a regional presence. So that's kind of how we think about our role in this. And I look forward to hearing from the other panelists, many of whom we've also worked with. So.
Thanks. That was great, Bob. You stole a little bit of what I was going to talk about, so maybe I'll be brief, but probably not as brief as others. But I'm Alexis Abramson. I'm faculty director of the Great Lakes Energy Institute, as Bob mentioned. We're at Case Western Reserve University. I'm also a professor in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and we have been the recipient of the support of the Cleveland Foundation and others to help move us forward. And I'll talk about some of those activities in a second, but I want to stress something, and this is something that I refer to when I talk about what's going on in our energy economy. And I think that it's probably obvious, particularly to everybody in this room, that a healthy economy relies on energy. And I like to think of energy as sort of being the lifeblood that runs through our economy, that provides the nourishment to really convert what nature gives us into the engineered services and goods that we all rely on every day. And we think about throughout history how innovation and enhanced productivity have really driven economic growth, and what a unique position we are in right now to marry that idea of innovation with the inflection point we're at with respect to energy to really propel our economy forward. So we think about things like new oil and gas discoveries that are affecting our global competitiveness. We think about third world countries growing their economies and their reliance on energy. We also think about things that affect us every day, like embedded intelligence encroaching on everything that we do, on hyperconnectivity of everything, and about decentralization or distributed energy increasing and increasing and increasing. And we really are at this an inflection point with respect to how energy will influence our economy in the future. So take distributed energy just as one example, and we see how that has affected both in positive and negative ways the economies of Denmark and Germany, and that have been repeated in other countries such as Italy and Greece. And Ohio, we really cannot keep our heads buried in the sand. We need to be learning from these economies. We need to be participating in the energy revolution and really readying ourselves for both, I would say, the positive and negative impact that the future energy economy is going to have on our state. So to turn now to the strong university, since I'm the representative here from the university community, we really can play an important role in this energy revolution. We're the innovators. We can help this state recognize where the world is heading and how to manage our transition through, for example, our natural gas boom and into the future energy economy. We are building the next great energy technologies that will play an integral role in our energy economy of the future. So just a few examples out there. Bob mentioned a couple, but we've got faculty Bob Savinel, who's leading a team building an iron-based flow battery. There was a question earlier about energy storage. This is a utility-scale energy storage device that will enable distributed energy across the globe. Professor Roger French is leading a group exploring how data analytics can be used to enhance the performance, lifetime, and degradation of solar energy. Professor Ken Loparo and his collaborators are developing novel approaches to enhance our grid, that behemoth of an engineered structure built on 20th century technologies that we all know is aging. Professor Matheson, who continues to lead our effort to investigate cutting-edge innovations for the wind industry. And even Professor Advin Kula, who's exploring the potential for using polymers in unique ways for natural gas and oil exploration. So these are incredibly bright, motivated innovators. They're here. They need the support of Ohio because without it, our competition elsewhere in the country will have an unfair advantage. We need incentives in place to encourage innovation in the energy industry so that research, development, commercialization, and also manufacturing can remain largely in Ohio. So I also want to just end by saying that there's the innovation side of it, and earlier we heard a question about the education side of it. It is incredibly important, too, that we prepare our future leaders, and I mean leader in a very broad sense, to understand and navigate that inflection point I referenced before, this dynamically changing energy landscape. So we really need to bring energy literacy to the younger generations, to our campuses, to K-12, so that the next generation of executives and educators and politicians and technology experts, I don't care in what field you're actually interested in studying, but everybody needs to be prepared to address the energy challenges of the future. So that this requires from our state, a commitment to, an investment in these curious minds to build a connected, healthy, and robust energy economy.
Thank you, Alexis. Tom?
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm afraid it's going to be a bit of a letdown to have to watch me speak about wind energy after watching the beautiful video from the Ohio Environmental Council. So appreciate the opening act, and I'll do what I can to put some numbers to the stories that you saw in that video. I represent the American Wind Energy Association. We represent project developers, owners, manufacturers, construction firms, transportation firms, law firms, financial firms, et cetera. Everybody involved from soup to nuts in wind energy. So I want to talk briefly about the benefits that wind energy has brought to the state and the potential going forward, dispel some myths about cost and reliability from wind, and then close up by talking about the opportunities for the state under the EPA's carbon regulations. In terms of benefits, 436 megawatts of installed capacity in the state, serving 105,000 homes. Nationally, there's 61,000 megawatts of wind energy installed, utility scale turbines that is, in 39 states that provide the electrical output equivalent to 53 average-sized coal plants or 14 average-sized nuclear plants. So wind is definitely a mainstream, proven energy resource. There's between 1,000 and 2,000 direct and indirect jobs from wind energy in the state of Ohio today, and up to 50,000 nationally, and has been as high as 85,000 nationally, depending on the ebb and flow of the construction schedules. The cumulative capital investment in the state of Ohio from wind energy is $890 million. There's 1,400 megawatts that have been approved, certified by the Ohio Power Siting Board. If those are built, that would be another $2.8 billion of investment in the state. Nationally, wind energy has provided somewhere between $15 and $20 billion a year annually over the last several years. There's also, as was referenced in the video, lease payments to landowners. It helps keep family farms in the family. There's about $2.5 million worth of those every year to Ohio landowners. And there's payment in lieu of taxes to local communities that benefit the schools and other infrastructure that you also saw in the video. That's over $3.5 million nationally. In terms of potential, someone asked a question earlier about the potential for distributed generation. For utility scale wind, the National Renewable Energy Lab, which is a part of the U.S. Department of Energy, has calculated that Ohio has a potential of 55 gigawatts of wind energy alone, which would serve 99% of Ohio's current electricity demand. I'm not suggesting that level of deployment of wind is achievable, but it does go to show that there is plenty of potential there to go well beyond where Ohio is today, which is about slightly under 1% of wind energy. And you trail most of your neighbors, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, et cetera. And that stat that I just mentioned, the 55 gigawatts, 99%, shows that you trail not because there isn't potential in the state. You trail for other reasons, policy support, et cetera. Ohio leads the nation in wind-related manufacturing. There are 61 facilities across the state that serve the wind energy industry supply chain. There's over 500 facilities nationally in 44 states. And in terms of environmental benefits, which also came up in an earlier panel, wind energy in Ohio today saves 248 million gallons of water, or 2.6 billion bottles of water. Wind energy in 2013 alone reduced Ohio's carbon emissions by 2%, SO2 emissions by 16 million pounds, and NOx emissions by 4 million pounds. In terms of the cost, I think a lot of politicians sort of have in their mind the cost profile of renewable energy from 5 or 10 years ago. The reality is that wind energy's costs have come down by 50, almost 60% over the last 5 years. The U.S. Energy Information Administration, which is sort of the nonpartisan statistical experts on energy, all sources of energy, fossil, renewable, et cetera, have said that wind energy is one of the most affordable options for new electric generation of any type. That was also echoed by Lazard, which is a major economic and asset management consulting firm, in a report they issued in September. And as another panelist referenced earlier as well, not only is it affordable today, but it's going to be affordable 20 or 30 years from now. because you can lock in your price today and know what it's going to be going forward. So for people that are concerned about the carbon regulations, for example, lock in your wind energy contracts today and you'll know what your cost of compliance is throughout the duration of the EPA's carbon regulation. Just like I think many of us try to secure 30-year interest on our house mortgages because of the certainty that provides, the wind energy contracts for 20 or 30 years can provide that same type of certainty. Another U.S. Department of Energy lab has a great chart in their 2013 Wind Technologies report that shows the range of EIA assumed gas prices going out 30 years. And there's historical volatility, and they're assuming a pretty broad range potentially going forward. But the chart is combined with the cost of wind power purchase agreements that have been signed in 2011, 12, and 13, I believe it is. And what you'll see is these are the gas price assumptions. All of the wind contracts are underneath those long-range gas price assumptions, and they keep getting lower as you get into more recent vintage years. So keep that in mind when you hear about the cost of renewables broadly, but wind energy in particular. In terms of reliability, Ohio, as I said, is about 1% wind generation. Iowa is at 25% of wind generation. That's actual generation, not just installed capacity. South Dakota is also over 25%. There are 9 states that are over 12% electric generation from wind, and 17 states that are over 5%. So dramatically increasing Ohio's wind generation is doable, and none of those states are having reliability issues as a result of those levels of penetration. There was a study done by the grid operator that runs the grid in Ohio called PJM. They also run the grid in a bunch of neighboring states out into the mid-Atlantic. They did a study in March of this year, it came out, that said PJM could be 20 to 30% renewable energy, wind and solar was what was specifically studied over the next decade, decade and a half, and that would not raise any reliability issues. So finally on the EPA regulations, you've probably read in June of this year, the EPA proposed the first ever regulations to limit carbon pollution from existing power plants. They used a formula that assumed states could take a variety of actions on demand-side efficiency, renewable energy, nuclear, natural gas, and efficiency improvements at coal plants. And each state ended up with some different carbon reduction targets as a result of those assumptions. Ohio is assumed to be able to reduce its carbon emissions by 27% compared to 2005 by 2030. There's a lot of concern about, well, is that doable? Can we do it on the time frame that the EPA assumed, et cetera? The EPA assumed that Ohio could be only 6% renewables by 2029 and 11% renewables by the end of 2030. Coincidentally, that's the same percentage that is in the now frozen alternative energy portfolio standard that's been referenced. AWEA did some analysis, economic analysis, and calculated that Ohio could fully comply with their entire target by just being 13 to 14% renewables, depending on which of the EPA targets you use. So you could do slightly better than what was already in statute and fully comply with EPA's requirement under the Clean Power Plan.
Tom, got to call timeout, and I want to thank you.
Sure.
I was afraid that we were going to get through this entire program without my having the opportunity of saying timeout to a speaker.
And I only had one more point.
Gone. Lorry, you're up.
Oh, man, I need more time. I can't sit and talk and not see the audience, so. All right, I'm Lorry Wagner from LEEDCo, and we are the public-private, 5 public entities, 2 private entities group that is building an offshore wind industry in Ohio. First project is a demonstration project called Icebreaker, and the dream is to bring something here that we almost brought before. I want to thank the Cleveland Foundation for their vision starting back in 2004, allowing us to be here where we are today. And so my professor always said, I tell him all these great things I'm going to do, and he said, so what? So let's just suppose you've already done them. So I'm going to talk about this as if we have already done what we intended to do by 2030. And I'm going to tell you about, You know, imagine a world, and that reminds me, the last time I told this story was in speech class at school, and I got a D on it, so I'm going to try it again, just because I have to. So it's a story about where are we going to be in 20 years, and there are some theories that talk about time travel and things like that, and there's one theory that says when you go forward, you'll come back to where you started in the universe, and you'll be there before, like, your grandmother was born. And then there are some that say you won't age and everybody will, and you'll be there years later. So let's just suppose we come back for 2030, and we're here. And I'm imagining what it will be like. I can eat fish every single day. The greatest walleye in the world, everybody knows this, come from Lake Erie. Right now, the fish advisory in the state is 1 fish per month, not 1 a week, 1 per month. So it's a little over conservative. All right, 1 a week, 1 every couple of days. Why are we having this conversation? Because we have allowed our society to go forward and put mercury into the lake, 800 pounds a year from power plants into Lake Erie. But that isn't going to be here. We can eat fish every day. Another thing we will see is that the fish population will have grown by tens of millions of fish. How do I know this? It's really easy. The power plant in Monroe kills 20 million fish a year. A once-through cooling system in a coal plant, about 1,000 megawatts, 20 million fish a year. Guess what? All those fish are now alive. The other thing is that we will not be taking, turn it around. What we will see is a lot more fresh water, because all of the fresh water used in fracking will be recycled. How's that? Now the other thing is we would see, which we once saw between 1900 and 1960, is Northeast Ohio leads the country in job creation. What else will we see? The community colleges and the universities can't keep up with job demand. Ohio's the #1 place where companies want to locate because Ohio is cool. Cleveland is cool. We got clean water. We've got clean air. Asthma is probably down around historical levels, closer to 1 or 2% instead of 9 or 20%. So that's what we would see. We would see businesses trying to get into Ohio. And how do I know this? I'm a genius, of course. But really, I just read history. Let's go back to the late 70s. We invented the wind industry in Cleveland, Ohio. There are 500 companies in Hamburg, Germany today in the wind industry. Instead of 500 in the US, they would be in Cleveland. And instead of 50 to 80,000 jobs, we would have had 500,000 jobs in the region. We had the wind industry, and our politicians, both sides of the aisle, made the decision, the political decision, and they picked a winner. The winner was fracking. The results of picking fracking gave us the world we have today, good, bad, or indifferent. It has changed the economy, and we made a political decision in the late 70s, early 80s, that we were going to bet on fracking and we were going to send wind to Europe. So all of that investment is now in Europe. We have the opportunity today to take offshore wind and the wind industry in Ohio and create a future for all of us that is the future we could have had. So when you think about state policy and decisions, this really is all about politics. It's so much less than being about technology. And what we have to do today is we have to recognize for our region to go forward, we need to capture the wind and take us to where we're going to be as we go on this time travel. We have a choice. We can be 20 years from now where we have growth and we know it can happen, or we're going to be 20 years from now where we were 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorry. Michael, you're our cleanup hitter.
Okay, well, I think following Lori's vision is difficult. That was a little bit of What a Wonderful Life. At least it seemed like it, but I like that vision. I think it's important, number one, to have a vision, and I do think that politics is critical. I want to start out, so what I do is solar installations. We've heard about wind and the decline in costs by 50 to 60%. So when SB 221 passed in 2008, solar was being installed and people were being reimbursed in Ohio and in the federal government at a cost of between $6 and $7 a watt. That today, we're building a project at a school in Bath Township and Old Trail School at $1.71 a watt. So that's basically 25% the cost 6 years later. The result of that is that the price that you need to receive is about 15 cents a kilowatt hour to make a reasonable return on investment. We're not owning that project because you can't get that in Ohio right now because of the moratorium. But nonetheless, KeyBank is financing the project. It makes sense. And I do think, and this is the point I want to actually start and end with, is that culture trumps strategy. Peter Drucker. I think our culture took a segue with SB 310 that ultimately is an effort to throw sand in the gears of time, if you will. The fact is there is a forward momentum that is inexorable, in my opinion, toward doing the right thing. And as people gain information and knowledge and pay attention, things happen. So in 1980, they deregulated banking, and the banks resisted and got disintermediated, meaning people put their money elsewhere in mutual funds. That's what's happening in the energy industry today. People are disinvesting in energy in the public utilities, and you see it in terms of demand, by buying efficient lights, albeit these are fairly hot, so these may not be super efficient, by installing solar, and I agree, probably 6 to 10% of our energy in Ohio could efficiently be supplied by solar. What needs to change, and I expect will change as people awaken. I mean, 6 years ago, if you asked people, what do you pay for electricity? No one had any clue. People have a clue today. They're starting to pay attention. We heard from the pediatrician. The externalities of today's energy production, asthma, for example, mercury, the most potent neurotoxin that exists, that we willingly produce and pump out. Lord knows what that's doing to us, but probably not anything good. So if you just look at what's generally used for refrigeration, cooling, AC, to maybe as much as 6% of electricity demand. And if you look at the sort of diurnal lifestyle of energy, it goes up during the day and goes down at night. Solar is not the solution. I think we've heard a lot of differing solutions today, and that's where I think culture will trump strategy. If right now in Ohio, the government tried to set our energy strategy with the utilities. Not going to work long term. People will continue to experiment. Other states will jump ahead of us, and we will pay a price for that. But ultimately, we won't stop the inexorable force of time going forward toward renewables, in my opinion. What's happened in one quick story that I think economics will matter. In California today, they have something called peak pricing. So in the middle of the day, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you can pay as much as 30 cents per kilowatt hour for power in Southern California. Remember I said 15 cents a kilowatt hour will, at a profit, cover the cost of installing solar, which has no fuel cost going forward. So at some point, that cost, say year 10, goes to zero and you have free power. But if you offset your time of day pricing, and we get to time of day pricing, which I'm sure will happen in the next 10 years, people will leap to that solution because it will save them money. I've talked to hundreds of businesses. They want to do the right thing. They want, because they think from a marketing standpoint and otherwise it's beneficial, and I need to stop, but the fact is they have the triple bottom line we like to talk about, but it hasn't really made it out into business in terms of people, planet, profit. Profit still matters. It's profit, 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 people, planet. And yet, in a lot of the projects we did, and we did several at Hiram College, at University of Akron, Youngstown State, College of Worcester, Ruffing Montessori School, I think education ultimately will change our culture and is changing our culture. And free information and experimentation as we try things, we will realize that there are better solutions, and we will opt for them because they're not only better from a health standpoint, and we pay 17% of our GDP today for health, but also from an overall cost-benefit analysis, it will simply make sense, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, and let's thank this wonderful panel. Michael, you made a point, and I think overtly, and many of the other panelists today have made the point subtly, that there is not necessarily one solution to our energy issues. There are multiple solutions, and we need to focus on every one of those different pathways and change the culture so that we aren't stuck with one probably wrong solution to those energy problems. We have time for a few more questions if anyone would like to come to the microphone. And while we are getting a question, Doctor, you mentioned distributed generation in your talk, and you said there were pros and cons. Could you briefly discuss some of the pros and cons in some of those European economies
Sure.
that have moved towards distributed generation?
Sure. Probably obviously the pro, right? Distributed generation means more renewables, means more wind and solar out there. It actually, in addition to the positive environmental consequences of having more renewables than fossil fuels, there's an ability to have perhaps better optimized control of your grid. So that's one other way right now to turn on a big power plant and turn it off and ramp it on and ramp it off. That's a big decision to do that. But with a lot of distributed sources, you actually can have more optimized control over when you need energy and when you don't. On the con side, the utility structure, the centralized generation structure, the business model that underlies the utility, that is interwoven into our economy. We've had it for a long time. It's part of our economy. It's what we rely on. And as renewables become more and more prevalent, as distributed energy becomes more and more prevalent, that business model that the utilities rely on starts to break down, right? You have solar customers now not needing to buy as much energy from the grid. And so that business model the utilities are relying on starts to break down, and that's going to have a negative impact on our economies. We saw it happen in some European countries, and as a result, what those countries had to do was put a halt to the too quick of penetration of renewables in those countries because of the potential devastating effects that too quick penetration was having on their economies. So that's what I mean by positive and negative, and it's really something we can learn from and that we can build on to make sure that our state and our country cares for that in a responsible way.
Thank you. Question?
Thank you first for all the panelists today. And I had a very specific question to Mr. Vinson. With the recent spending bill that just passed last night at the Senate. Do you know what impact it had on the PTCs that they were discussing?
The spending bill that passed last night did not have the tax provisions in it. That's in a separate bill known as the tax extenders. All signals are that will still be approved before the Senate leaves for the holiday recess. Whether it's tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm not 100% sure, but it will be passed. The House has already passed it, so there are procedural hangups in the Senate that have nothing to do with the PTC or tax extenders.
Okay.
So once those get resolved, it'll be approved. It is,
Yes.
yes. Well, and technically it's through the end of 14, which is 2.5 weeks or whatever.
It's for this year. Question?
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Kelly Santa Maria, SC 2019, Sierra Club, all the green stuff, Green Energy Ohio. A third of the people here probably know who I am. Anyhow, I think it's a great forum. I think you're doing a good job the first time out. I would suggest that you do a little bit more energizing of the people because you're speaking to the choir. You know, we get it. We just need to get out and do something with it. So that's one thing. You're talking about education. The little girl that was here talking about education. P16, there's an State of Ohio initiative, P16. If anybody knows about it or doesn't know about it, check it out. It's education at the grade levels, trying to do something with volunteers, anybody that can get in and help the kids learn. And it's the expansion of K-12, P16, through college. So get involved. Third Federal's doing a good job with that, and I'm involved with them. No one mentioned crowdfunding, and our banker's gone and wherever Andrew is. But that's something to be considered if you're doing something, because crowdfunding is there, but they're changing some of the rules. So one thing no one has mentioned, because my feeling is if you're living in the world, you're a hellion, H-E-L-L. It's not that hell, it's help Earth live long. So if you're a hellion, you know who you are. So try to be one. Somebody likes that. I'm glad they like that. There you go. I heard about an initiative. I don't know the answer to this. Something about next year, the government is doing something about forcing people to change out their hot water tanks and go into tankless. If anybody's heard about that, I'd like to know if it's a fact or where it stands or whatever. I've got tankless. I've been preaching tankless for 15 years. So if you get a tankless, go to Lowe's, buy it for $800, put it in, you save $300 a year, you can afford it. So just do it. Don't get rid of your tank. Keep your tank, but, disconnect it. The other thing is that no one's mentioned, because we're doing the methane with recovery and all that, Ohio is like, it fluctuates between 1 and 2 in, we take everybody else's garbage in Ohio. All the other states send their garbage to us. It's making money, but that's what we're known for. And if you don't know that, you should know that, because, it's one of our things.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. No, but I would like somebody to talk to light pollution, if you can, because we're talking about animals and reptiles and things, and if you don't know much about it, you should learn about it, because it's part of the whole the whole thing. So thank you. Great job. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you. Anyone have anything on light pollution? I have something on light pollution. I once built a tennis stadium in Indian Wells, California. Unfortunately, this tennis stadium, which was a very large tennis stadium, was within the penumbra of the Mount Palomar Observatory. We had a light pollution problem that cost us a lot of money. So you don't want to do that. I would like to thank this panel for being with us. You did a terrific job. And on behalf of Ohio's Energy Future Tour, I would like to thank all of our panelists and all of you for being part of what we hope will be an ever-growing constituency to move forward these really important sustainable goals that we've been talking about this evening. Thank you, Jane Harf and your group, for putting this together. We are adjourned, and everyone can get out of the parking garage timely.